Every early morning in downtown Hyannis before sunlight has fully pierced the thin layer of mist clinging to the cafe windows, something causes people to stop in their tracks. It's not a vendor's shout or the smell of fresh waffles. It's a sight that once seen is never forgotten. Patrick appears at exactly 6:30, neither a minute early nor a minute late. He walks calmly along the old cobblestone street, quiet as if blending into the morning air. But what draws everyone's gaze isn't him, it's the six German shepherds walking beside him, close to his side, completely off leash. Griffin the Alpha walks on Patrick's left head, slightly raised ears, standing tall, eyes alert but not tense like a bodyguard, both loyal and aware of every step his master takes behind him. Arun and Keller, slightly smaller in build, but agile, often glancing toward passers-by on the right, are Vega and Sol One. Jet black the other, smoky gray, moving in near-perfect sync, so fluid they seem remotely controlled, and at the rear, like a quiet and steady shadow, walks the oldest brand, his back already strewn with gray, yet his steps steady and measured, the final anchor in a formation that feels precisely designed. None of them bark. They don't chase birds. They don't even look at strangers. Every movement mirrors Patrick's when he slows. They slow when he stops at the bakery. They all sit at once, tails still, eyes fixed on him, waiting. No commands are spoken, no hand gestures yet between them. There's an invisible language, a connection beyond physical form, held together only by unwavering trust. And that's what stirs the town. Many people smile each morning when they see Patrick. They call him the dog whisperer, half joking, half reverent. But some glances carry more suspicion. Older folks whisper in cafes, what kind of training makes them act like robots? Children point from behind windows. He must be giving them some kind of drug. Then a phone gets raised, then a second. A video captures Patrick and the six dogs crossing an intersection in the morning light. Their long shadows cast diagonally across the dewy pavement, all moving like a silent marching unit. In just hours, the clip spreads like wildfire. Hundreds of thousands of shares. A flood of mixed comments. Looks like a movie too perfect. Something's not right. No one can train dogs to walk off leash like that without tricks. An anonymous user posts a long comment with photos. I suspect he's using coercive techniques. The dogs don't look happy. Someone needs to investigate before it's too late. Patrick doesn't respond. He keeps his morning routine unchanged, buys a loaf of bread, and tears it into six equal pieces. Each dog receives one, as if part of a sacred ritual. Then the group turns and walks down the riverside path, where the morning water lies still as glass, reflecting each silent, even step. But public perception starts to shift. It's no longer just admiration. Now curiosity mingles with suspicion, as if behind that perfectly ordered formation, there's a secret. No one has cracked something that keeps eyes glued, yet also invites the question, if not leashes, then what holds them to him? That question, simple but haunting, is where the storm truly begins. And Patrick, though calm as ever, can sense something quietly moving in the dark. Day by day, Hyannis Central Square grows more crowded in the mornings. People who used to rush past to catch early trains now linger, pretending to wait for coffee or tie their shoelaces, but always watching one spot where Patrick and his six dogs will pass. It's no longer a surprising sight. It's become a ritual, like church bells or the first light of dawn, evoking a feeling of both calm and mystery. There's something about Patrick's stride, about how the dogs move with him, like a single unified body without any visible cues, that pulls people in, while leaving a strange unease one morning as Griffin gently lowered his head to touch the hand of a baby in a stroller, a gesture filled with sensitivity. A young woman captured the moment on her phone. She didn't think much of it, just posted the video with a simple caption, "Dogs are souls." No one could have predicted how far the video would go. In just 24 hours, it was shared over 1 million times. Comments poured in like a flood. I want to live in a place where dogs walk like this. He's a dog training genius, or some kind of controller, a whole squad marching without leashes. What are we even seeing? While many were in awe, others began dissecting the footage. None of them looked joyful. Their eyes are on the ground, not darting around, not curious. They don't engage with the world, only with that man. A behavioral science forum launched a thread. The Patrick case trained or programmed, hundreds joined the discussion. Some anonymous veterinarians suggested it was a sign of extreme submission, the result of prolonged stress-based control methods. Others disagreed. There's no shaking, no muscle tension, no flinching, only calm. That's not fear, that's trust. Regardless of who was right, the media firestorm ignited Patrick, who had never spoken publicly, suddenly became the center of a fierce debate, but he stuck to his routine. Still walked at 6:30 and still divided the bread into equal portions for the dogs. A ritual whose meaning remained known only to him and his pack. On the other side of the uproar was Lorraine Blake, a woman in her 50s living 2 states away, a former head of a shelter for abused dogs. She was widely respected in the rescue community for her high-profile campaigns. She published a long post with screenshots from the videos, beginning with a cryptic opening: "You don't need a whip to silence a creature, just take its freedom." She pointed out Vega's stiffness when a truck lunged across the road, noted Keller lowering his tail near a group of people. She called these signs conditioned reflexes. And at the end, she concluded, "A group of dogs denied the freedom to explore their environment isn't trained. They're trapped inside themselves." Her post quickly surpassed 50,000 shares. Public opinion began to shift. Journalists from animal welfare and human rights publications reached out for interviews with Patrick, but none got a reply. He continued to live quietly in his old cabin on the outskirts where, after Lorraine's post, strange headlights began appearing late at night from the porch. Bran, the oldest, often stayed awake until nearly midnight. His eyes clouded, but his hearing was still sharp. Any unusual sound near the wooden fence would make him stand, turning toward Patrick, awaiting instruction. But Patrick would only rest a hand gently on his head. No words, just a touch, and Bran would lie back down. Not long after, the Hyannis Police Department received an anonymous tip. Not just a warning this time, but evidence. The message included a close-up photo of Vega's collar. What once looked like ordinary leather now showed an odd seam. Alongside the photo was a single chilling line: "There's something inside, and it's not just flesh." The message, exactly one day after it was sent, triggered an emergency check, marking the start of a true earthquake. Patrick, as usual, said nothing, but the 6 dogs, from Griffin to Bran, seemed to begin changing. They no longer lay sleeping on the porch as they had before. They took turns on watch, and one evening in early June, people saw Patrick walking in the woods, not with the 6 dogs, but only with Griffin by his side. For the first time, Griffin did not walk beside Patrick, but ahead of him, his ears standing upright, each step silent, as if following the trail of something approaching. That morning, light rain fell, enough to wet the wooden steps in front of Patrick's house, but not enough to change his usual routine. Griffin was the first to step out of the porch, shaking his head gently to dislodge the water droplets from his ears. The 6 dogs lined up neatly as always, but today Patrick didn't go anywhere. He stood still on the front steps, his eyes fixed on the trail leading out to the street. The air carried a vague sense of foreboding, as if the forest behind the house was holding its breath. Only 5 minutes later, an unusual sound broke the stillness. Not the familiar sounds of town traffic, but the smooth hum of an engine, finely tuned for special patrols. 2 unmarked, lead-cold police vehicles turned onto the curve at the end of the road and stopped in front of the fence. The doors opened. 5 uniformed officers stepped out, accompanied by an animal inspection officer. Patrick didn't seem surprised. He merely bent down and gave Run a gentle pat on the head, a brief, decisive touch, as though he had been prepared for this moment. Patrick Miles, the oldest officer, spoke, his voice not harsh but rather procedural. "We have a warrant to inspect your house and the animals under your ownership, by Section 9 on the safety and welfare of pets." Patrick nodded without asking why. He stepped aside and opened the door. The 6 dogs showed no reaction. They silently sat on either side of the porch without needing any command. The small wooden house was unremarkable. A simple living room, an oak dining table, a few bookshelves, and a cold, unused fireplace. A faded map hung on the wall, unannotated, with scattered red dots marking various locations across the United States. One of the officers made a note of that the inspection proceeded in an orderly manner. Patrick did not follow them, only standing on the porch, his eyes tracking the dogs, each one being called in to be inspected individually by the veterinarian. Griffin was the first to be checked. The officer touched the collar, lifting it to look underneath. Nothing. Vega, Keller, Rune, all were carefully examined, but no signs of irregularities were found until it was Sol's turn. A black steel-coated German shepherd who usually walked on Patrick's right, his gait slightly leaning forward, his left leg bearing a small scar. Sol's collar was made of brown leather, the stitching sturdy, but when the veterinary officer gently pressed the inner edge, a faint click sounded. A thin compartment near the metal clasp popped open. A small nylon packet fell to the ground. All movement froze immediately. The senior officer bent down and picked up the package, his eyes never leaving Patrick, who remained motionless on the porch. The nylon package contained a white powder wrapped in 3 layers, meticulously sealed as if to avoid detection by scanning devices. "What is this?" another officer asked, his voice tense. Patrick didn't answer. He merely turned to look at Sue. The dog showed no sign of distress, simply standing still with his ears drooping. Sol's gaze was directed at his owner. Not fearful, but apologetic. "We have to detain you for further investigation." No resistance. No defense. Patrick raised both hands before the cuffs were placed on him. Griffin stretched out, letting out a short growl. Patrick shook his head gently. Griffin sat down. Bran licked his leg lightly as a farewell run, turned his face away, not looking when Patrick was led off the porch as the vehicle left the wooden house. The rain began to intensify, sliding down the windshield inside the cabin. Patrick sat silently. His eyes were closed as though listening to something not of human voice, but a very faint, familiar sound, like the sound of dog paws tapping on the wooden floor each morning behind the 6 dogs. Now only 5 stood silently under the rain. No leashes were holding them in place, but they did not leave. They waited, and from a distance in the cold mist of Hyannis, a civilian drone soared into the sky, attached with a camera beginning to scan around the abandoned house. The story of Patrick from a strange man walking his dogs to the center of a storm named international crime had begun. But there was something that none of the inspection team knew. That day, Sue had intentionally slowed his pace. Allowing the officer to reach the collar, for not every dog shows loyalty by walking beside some, choose to sacrifice their role to awaken a larger door. Slowly creaking open, the unmarked pickup truck carrying Patrick to the Hyannis police station arrived just as the sun began to break through the rain from the previous night, left a thin layer of mist clinging to the tree canopies along the road, making the windows of the vehicle fog up as though the town was watching through a silent curtain. Inside the cabin, Patrick sat in the back seat, his hands uncuffed, his gaze steady and unblinking. His silence was not defensive or stubborn, but the quiet of someone who had long been accustomed to being unable to speak occasionally. His eyes seemed to pierce through the glass, not looking at the world but listening to the sound of Griffin's feet on the gravel, the faint brushing of Bran's fur against the wooden porch. When he shifted position, such tiny sounds. But for Patrick, they were the heartbeat of something more than flesh and blood. Meanwhile, at the small wooden house on the outskirts of town, the remaining 5 dogs began to exhibit unusual behaviors. Griffin, the lead dog, always calm and steady, barked twice that night when he heard an odd noise from the fence. This was not a barking alert. It was an internal warning, something only the dogs in the group understood. Bran, though old and frail, did not leave the porch all night. He braced himself each time Griffin changed direction in the dark. Bran's eyes seemed to carry a deep premonition. Patrick would not return. Soon Run scratched lightly at the front door. Not because he wanted to go out, but as if trying to find a familiar scent from behind the wooden boards. Keller, the sharpest of the group, began marking the boundaries of the house. Though the land had already been clearly defined as their territory, this action seemed like a protective ritual, as if the dogs were silently acknowledging that they would have to take care of each other inside the police station. Things were not going according to plan. Officer Rick, the first to take Patrick's case, hammered at the keyboard, frowning strange no ID number. No social security card, no driver's license, no medical registration, no school records. Another officer tried entering Patrick's fingerprints into the federal database. The result was just a white line flashing on a black background. No match found. They tried to trace through administrative records from the DMV Department of Motor Vehicles to the SSA, Social Security Administration, to birth registries, all empty Patrick Miles. That name, according to all official records, had never existed. Could be a false identity, one officer suggested. Well, at least there should be some real trace of a real person. Rick countered here. There's nothing. It's like he fell from the sky. Chief Officer Ben Howley, who had worked in Hyannis for over 20 years, couldn't hide his concern. He quietly walked into the interrogation room and stood before Patrick, who sat still, tapping his fingers lightly on the table. "Mr. Patrick," he said, his voice not authoritative but filled with suspicion, "is there anything you want to say? We don't know who you are, but it seems you're not a normal man." Patrick looked up, his eyes calm yet decisive. He answered in a low voice, almost a whisper. "The person you're trying to define doesn't exist in any system you control." Howie paused. Part of him wanted to press further, but part of him knew he had touched on something beyond his authority. By afternoon, the case file was transferred to the FBI as a possible case involving a false identity and illegal trafficking of controlled substances. The Interior Secretary marked it priority level medium. But when the technical department opened the image file taken from Soul's collar, where the drug package was found, they discovered something no one in the local police station had noticed: a second line of stitching, running around with just the right length and depth to house a tracking chip. Immediately, the signal from the hardware embedded in Saul's collar was activated and sent to a hidden address in the Special Communication System of National Defense. At a facility underground, more than 800 meters from Hyannis, a red light flashed on the control panel. A gray-haired technician looked up and entered a code that hadn't been used in over a decade. The screen lit up. Ghost line breach had detected encryption. Patrick 7. The technician looked up, turning to a plainclothes officer. "We've got a problem, and this time it's not from the outside." That night, Griffin continued to patrol around the yard, but instead of returning to the house like usual, he lay close to the door, his eyes open, ears perked at the gusts of wind. Meanwhile, in the Hyannis police station, Patrick, a man with no records, no history, no past on paper, sat still waiting. Not to be exonerated, but waiting to see who would arrive first, those who wanted him to disappear, or those who had once entrusted him with something no one else dared to do. That very night, when the digital files were sent to the central data system in Langley, Virginia, the headquarters of the FBI, the anomaly immediately became apparent. An orange warning line flashed. Subject data is empty, but there is evidence of internal interference at the level. 3 system access was previously removed by Special Authority Valentina Cruz. A cybersecurity expert, was the first to touch the code. She had worked with many compromised systems, but had never seen a record that wasn't deleted, but one that had never legally existed. What she was seeing wasn't a gap, it was a blank space, intentionally created. The report was sent to Deputy Director for Special Operations Bernard Thorne. When he read the ghost line encryption, he immediately stood up. He had never thought he would see that term again, at least not after everything that had been buried in Afghanistan. "Keep him," he ordered briefly. "Don't transfer him to the state, and check all the dogs back in Hyannis." The next morning, the atmosphere at the local police station had completely changed. A federal task force of 3 agents arrived, not in uniforms, offering no details, but only presenting a warrant to hold Patrick under national security grounds. No one in the local police dared to ask any further questions. It felt as though an invisible hand had descended on the entire town. Not loud, but enough to silence all sounds. Patrick remained silent when Agent Jordan entered the interrogation room and handed him a stack of blank documents, or a way of saying, "We know who you are." Patrick did not react, only when he noticed the small logo in the corner of the paper. A dog's head embossed, the symbol of a secret branch that had been erased from the military budget more than 12 years ago. Did he give a slight nod? "They know now," Patrick said, "and you've just confirmed it." At that very moment, at the familiar wooden house on the outskirts of Hyannis, a special team of technicians arrived, not to inspect Patrick's traces, but to inspect the dogs. They proceeded one by one: Griffin Rune, Keller Bran, and Vega Griffin. The first to be examined cooperated unusually well. He showed no reaction when approached, simply lying down and tilting his head just right to allow the scanning device to detect the ultra-thin chip implanted beneath the skin near his neck, a technology that only high-ranking military forces had ever used. Rune, when scanned, revealed hidden tracking data. However, the encryption layer took the team over an hour to crack. Keller, the quickest reflex in the group, revealed an audio-directional microphone embedded in his body operating on a specified frequency, as though it could hear commands from hundreds of meters away. Even under signal jamming conditions, Brand, though old and frail, still showed traces of a cold data storage circuit. Stay with us.